Easy enough recap this week. Castiel went off, got to hunt some things and save some people. He's now definitely a part of the family business. Meanwhile, Sam and Dean ran into an old ally that ended up... Oh, wait, she was already dead. So this time they actually brought her back to life. Yeah, it's so novel I passed out myself. Good job, guys. First, quick little note. Audience member AlleyCat22 said I needed to, carve some initials into this table. So, ta-da! So now, I think we can all agree this table's legit. Last week I used having a child become a drug dealer as a metaphor for my feelings of the show right now. This episode has done nothing to shake those feelings. I mean, I love Eileen. I need a figure for her. Here we go. Elspeth from Magic the Gathering will represent Eileen. Not only do they have initials in common, but if you know the story this character is from, it's rather appropriate. So, Eileen is just totally adorkable in the best ways, and I also really love the idea of a hunter with a disability, which gives him or her an advantage over certain monsters. What if we had a blind hunter that could, find shapeshifters? Maybe they give off a real subtle smell that this person can pick up. There's just such a rich vein for storytelling there that I wish they had tapped more into it, especially for her. I think she would have done great with a larger part in The Wayward Sisters. And I'll admit, I find her a far better fit for Sam, since Jessica or Sarah, and I'm kind of hoping that they'll get a happily ever after from the show, even though we all know they won't. I would have settled for some, cuddling after her resurrection, but I also recognize that Sam has a higher kill count by that method than with any of his guns, so maybe it's best that we not risk it. And I thought it was a real nice touch that the whole resurrection process was very evocative of the Christian baptism, which is described as putting on new flesh and gaining a new life. Normally, I'm not a fan of such on-the-nose symbolism, but, it's just great to have the boys get a win. I really like Castiel's little side story. It just always works in the show to see him, to just get out there and be among ordinary people. And it's great to see him get a spine and take the villain head on, like the righteous warrior of God that angels are supposed to be. Episodes like this one are what I'd point to as examples of why I believed Misha could have made a really great Batman. I will go ahead and admit that with all the walking around in the woods he was doing, I thought we were going to get a bit of a repeat homage of the Wendigo episode, which is a personal favorite of mine. But it was nice to see a Jinn, as sometimes I think the show relies on vampires and werewolves a little too often when they need just another quick monster. Though, part of me was really curious, how was Castiel getting the money for the bait shop? I know the boys' finances kind of require a grain of salt, but I can hand wave it easy enough unless they do something really egregious, like set up an elaborate body cam system. But Cass, he's worked like one job and otherwise has spent thousands of years with no concept of money. Seems like there could have been a pretty entertaining mini-story that could have been told there. I will also admit, I would pay all the money for a sequence of Cass fishing. We know he can talk to animals, so what is that like? If he catches a fish, does he just not have the heart to keep it? Does he go out on the lake and talk to the fish as like a meditation exercise? There's just so much potential, so many possible scenes that we could have gotten there, and just feels like the writers really dropped the ball on giving us some great classic Castiel moments. But I am fine with what we got. This time, I'll also admit that I really liked Dean's depression, which I just realized how weird that sounds. Before, in the past, when he would kind of enter a nihilistic spiral, which I think was in season Uh, would would it actually be shorter to list the seasons that Dean isn't depressed in? I guess I'm thinking of number 7, where he really became like alcoholic. Whichever one it was. Alcoholic Dean felt too heavy-handed. I'm not sure what the term I want, but this Dean, the one that's irreverent and who just has no motivation about anything anymore, that feels to me more like how Dean would spiral. Because what some people don't realize is depression spirals aren't always the same. People dealing with one can react in different ways, and stories impressing upon us that this is depression, this is what someone who is suicidal looks like. It does a disservice and leads to the shocks some people go through when they lose someone to that spiral. There are other ways that people can be in trouble, and sometimes it's not always immediately obvious. It was also great to see Keegan Connor Tracy again. This is personally funny for me because I'm often willing to go along with the show when they repeat actors. To the point, I honestly rarely recognize them. So if someone comes on that played a random civilian previously, I'll be like, sure, whatever, new person. But this episode, when the witch mother appeared, I legit thought this was another reoccurring character. So got on the internet and then confirmed, yep, she was in fact the Supernatural fan from the season 4 episode, which introduced Chuck. In fact, I kind of wondered if we were about to get the revelation that the fan after that episode had gone into witchcraft, or maybe had been into it all along. We didn't hear much about the head witch, who she was, or her past, so we could kind of make that a fan theory if y'all want. It just would have been fun to have had a line or two thrown in to give us a few hints and be a real fitting bookend. All this praise, what soured greatness this week? 2.5, 3 things really. First, the idea that Eileen avoided going back to hell because she just ran far away, so far that she avoided Rowena's spell or Balfagor's horn. That brings up more questions than it answers. Like, how many other ghosts out there have done that? I mean, do the boys still have tons of ghosts that they need to go clean up? If not, why not? I mean, this whole bit kind of sours Rowena's sacrifice, as we now know that her spell had a limited range, and kind of means she helped, but ultimately failed. And given that this was the coda, the funeral episode for her, that kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Kind of comes off a little mean. Are we just tossing out the bunker's warding in general? Seems like Ghost would have been one of those things that shouldn't be able to get inside it, but, you know, Sam had a sense of Eileen in the kitchen, and then they take her to the bathroom, and I don't know, I'm just... whatever, anybody can get into the bunker if they can just find the door. I guess that's it now. But all that aside, what really, really bugged me this episode was the show deciding to double down and enforce the been in hell, can't go to heaven rule. Especially since to pull this off, the writers have to invent that being killed by a hellhound, one gets dragged down to hell. That just makes no sense with everything we've been told about the afterlife. Anubis said that nobody could influence him. A soul's destination is decided by that person's decisions. Well, that and dogs, apparently. Given the power this show has talked about souls having, we again reach a conundrum. Remember when Castiel messed with time travel to try and invent a few thousand extra souls to aid him in his war against Raphael? Well, if a hellhound can just drag a soul to hell, no matter what, then why didn't Lilith or Azazel or Crowley or Lucifer or anybody else just send out packs and thousands of hellhounds to just devastate towns and gain thousands of souls that way? It would have given them a devastating edge against heaven. Remember back in season 8, the trials to close the gates of hell? Do you remember what the second trial was? Rescue a soul from hell and take it to heaven. Seems like a really dickish move to make that trial absolutely impossible. We now know there's no way anybody could have ever accomplished that unless maybe Naomi shows up to help, but it's not like she's still around. Oh, wait! You ever just get the feeling like you're the only one watching the show? And then you think larger picture. Why are Castiel's powers failing him? None of the other excuses, especially considering his history, really makes sense. We don't have an answer yet. Part of me has begun suspecting maybe if Chuck is wounded by that shot Sam took, are angels all losing their power because God is wounded? But then you remember what we learned a couple seasons ago. If that's true, heaven's about to start failing, and then we'll get a whole bunch of ghosts loosed on earth. You know, what if that had been the reason for, say, Kevin and Aileen? Just imagine their appearances being the first warnings of an impending collapse of heaven. Then by now we could have this tense arc running through the season as the boys have to figure out some way to shore up the afterlife instead of fretting over Chuck. They had a great obvious opportunity here. Instead, we're just breaking stories. All that put together, this episode is far more of a solid 4-shell outing, both objectively and on my personal taste. I have no reservations about this score. Had the canon been tighter and there were less plot hiccups, I would have scored this a 5-shell easy. But as it is, they just keep barely missing it this season. The general quality and improvement is greatly appreciated, and it was great to see Aileen again. I hope you all have a good Thanksgiving. I am thankful that you watch these videos and give me a bit of time out of your day. Subscribe if you want to watch more of these or whatever. It's free country. Until the next episode, keep hunting.